Welcome back, everybody. Monday morning show off and rolling. Jeff Kolpak will join us about a half hour. Get all of our Bison football intake coming in there. North Dakota State with its home opener set for Saturday with Southeast Missouri State. But first, a reaction to what we saw this past weekend in week 2 of FCS football with our guy Sam Herder, who joins us each and every Monday at 9:35 from Hero Sports. BetMGM back from a trip to Bozeman that lived up to the hype, my man. We've been talking about this game for the better part of probably about 5 months. So when it actually plays out like that Bills-Ravens game did last night and lives up to it, then you just come away and like, yeah, that was pretty darn good Saturday night.
Yeah, it was great to be there. It was a special atmosphere. The Gold Rush certainly lived up to the hype. And I've been to Bozeman a couple of times before for, the Brawl of the Wild. And that one just has a different intensity to it. But, this one just seeing, actually it being warm enough to be out and tailgating for longer than 20 minutes just to see some of the tailgating rigs, was cool for to see just how Montana State tailgates. And then the game itself, the atmosphere was awesome. I believe they broke a record for single game attendance there, so that was cool. Then the game itself was, certainly clunky at times and sloppy at times. Especially special teams was something where the special teams was sloppy. But I think some of the offensive sloppiness was just due to how good these defenses were. I think the linebackers and the defensive lines on both sides for these two teams was really, really good. So I thought it was a heavyweight bout. It reminded me a little bit of NDSU South Dakota State last regular season, where it was some people watched it and said, oh, these teams don't look that great. But I just think it was that type of game where it was two good teams going at it. And, sometimes there are a little sloppiness and, stuff like that in it.
When Montana State scored to go up in overtime, we're watching the highlights now. I mean, Lofton Ogroski is I've been hearing about this guy for 2 years. He's a dude, and he showed it there. He scored the touchdown that tied it, and then SDSU needed all of one play to take the lead. This was the touchdown there to Braden Delahoe. That made it 30-24. Now, everyone's going to talk about the play calling at the end, Sam, on the Lampson. They got a PI benefit there. They gave him a first down, or it was actually 5 yards. It came up short. So it was 4th down and 1. You take us from there on the play call there that ended up coming 1 yard short.
Yeah, there are so many moments in this game, and there was like a 4th and 6, and then SDSU jumped off sides to set up that 4th and 1. And I remember thinking like, man, if South Dakota State loses this game, there's gonna be so many small things, including that one right there. And same thing with Montana State, like so many small moments. The 12 men on the field, that's kind of forgotten about too, but that was a big moment that gave SDSU more time. But yeah, the 4th and 1 call, I didn't mind it because I did think that Montana State's offensive line played pretty well. Their pass protection wasn't always there, but I thought they were getting a pretty good push. And Julius Davis, he can get that tough yardage, but running into the teeth of South Dakota State's defense, hindsight is what it is. Maybe you don't call that, but at the same time, I understand the confidence to be able to pick up 1 yard. And from my angle up in the press box, you're looking at it from an angle. It was really hard to see if he got it or not, but when they measured, he was pretty well short as well. So it's just from the Montana State side of things, they've been right there with South Dakota State and NDSU the last now 4 times they've played. And so you put the Bobcats in that discussion while also saying at some point they got to get one of these wins to really, really, truly be in that discussion and overtake one of these two teams.
You can't have it yet until they do it, right? You have to beat them to do it. Now, the last 2 Montana State home losses, that on Saturday stopped on 4th and 1 in double overtime, and then the Bozeman block, getting the extra point blocked in overtime against the Bison. That's how they've lost their last 2 games. That is gut-wrenching. That is, I don't know of a harder way to lose than they have the last 2 times at home.
Yeah, and a lot of it is just in both of these games, just small plays or an inch here or there, or sequences here or there. And, that's what has made NDSU so good. And a lot of their close games they've pulled out is just some small details. Winning in the margins is what has separated, NDSU in some of these close games. And South Dakota State has pulled off some of these type of wins as well. Montana State has just, fallen short in these. And, definitely a lot of, frustration, I think, on Montana State's side of things, feeling that they are right there with these 2 powers. But like we've talked about, you got to And I know Montana State beat South Dakota State in the 2021 semifinals, but to do it more recently, that
Yep.
takes that program to the next level, and they're right there, but they just can't get over that hump.
All right, let's give the Jacks their flowers here. Now, you and I were both of the same mindset. We did not think SDSU was going to fall off the table and be bad. I did not pick them to win this game. I thought Montana State at home, really tough. I think the Cats would win it, but it wouldn't shock me the Jacks won it. Does this change your evaluation now? Because we still have league games to come of where SDSU stands in terms of relation to the Bison, of where they're at nationally.
Yeah, I still think, I had NDSU number one, this week, and I felt, pretty comfortable
As did I.
putting them at number
Yep.
one. You can look at on paper resume and say, well, South Dakota State has two then ranked wins. Like maybe they should move up. But I think just with how NDSU has dominated its two opponents now, the Citadel and Tennessee State aren't probably going to be playoff teams, but it's not like if NDSU won 21-7 and 24-10 against these teams, then you'd be like, oh, well, maybe you bump South Dakota State up. But just with how NDSU has dominated, I think the Bison are still comfortably number one. But SDSU is certainly better than I anticipated, and I was already pretty high on,
Yep.
on the Jacks coming into this year. I think we'll see. Their secondary will probably get tested more, but I think they're better than expected. The front seven for South Dakota State is really, really good. I don't know if they're as deep on the defensive line, but I think they are. Their top three at linebacker might be a little bit behind previous, but not as much. But I think they have better depth at linebacker. But then offensively, I think is for South Dakota State, I think they have potential to be really good. I
Yep.
think they're good right now, but the offensive line could be much better, and they're already are playing, pretty decent. I think Chase Mason has looked really good. Overall looking very comfortable. Running back depth, I have a question mark there. Finding a receiver behind, Lofton, I think is going to be
I
really
agree.
important as well.
Yep.
But for where South Dakota State was in late December, I mean, they had no coaches in their offices at all. All of their players, or most of their players, were off campus because it was Christmas break. They had no idea who was coming back. For them to be 2-0 right now, there's a lot of things to nitpick about, which I did do with South Dakota State, but the fact that they're 2-0,
Yeah.
it's really hard to complain right now with where they're at.
And they have two, I would say, layups coming up before they get into Valley play. That they've got a chance here to really get some momentum going before they start Missouri Valley Football Conference play. Lofton Ogroski is their next wide receiver stud. I've been hearing about this kid from Sioux Falls for the last little bit. Now, here he goes. He's going to be the Valley offensive player. At least he should be. 12 for 125 and 2 touchdowns. He was dynamite. And Montana State couldn't cover him Saturday night.
Yeah, he's really good. I'm not saying he's Griffin Wilde, but it's a little bit like last year as far as Wilde is the guy. Who are the 2, 3, 4 wide receivers for South Dakota State?
Well,
None of them really stepped up a whole lot. And I think that cost South Dakota State in some moments last year. And so, yeah, Ogroski is excellent. He's very, very good, but they do need to find some depth behind him so they can spread the ball out more.
all right, now to their neighbors in Vermilion. What in the world's going on in South Dakota? That score I saw, that game was already final when we landed on Saturday night, and I did a double take. Like, what? They lost to Lamar? Lamar? Like, I don't think Lamar's going to be any good in the Southland. USD had 2 monster turnovers in this game, including one where they were going to go in for a touchdown and fumble into the end zone. We're showing that now. There's some real, I think, questions now at South Dakota at 0-2.
Yeah, for sure. And, this was a game at Lamar where I thought it was a good gauge for South Dakota because Lamar was, I think, at 7 wins last year. And so they weren't a playoff squad last year, but they're at least like a respectable opponent. And, so I thought it was a good gauge for South Dakota to see, how much they would win by. Would they win by 7 or would they win by 28? And was not expecting them to lose this game. And I didn't have eyes on it. That's, one of the drawbacks of, being in a press box somewhere else. You can't watch as many games. I started the rewatch last night a little bit, and so I haven't finished to see exactly what happened with USD, but they got off to a pretty good start. And then I think it just got into a bit of a defensive battle from there. It's not like either team really put up great yardage or anything like that. But I think there's still a lot of holes, especially in the secondary for USD, and we especially saw that in week 1 when they went to Iowa State. Then offensively, obviously a lot to replace from last year, especially on the offensive line. But I felt in the preseason that they would at least have a developmental program to be better on the
Yeah.
offensive line. Plus, you have Bauman, and you have Pierre as well. That's a really good one-two punch. So you felt like they could figure things out offensively pretty quickly, but the offensive line isn't where it needs to be,
No.
and I just don't think they have a like that game changer at wide receiver. And it just doesn't seem like Bauman has much comfortability, in that offense.
With
So that's a real tough
with
loss.
Carter Bell being gone, that's a guy that was his dude the last couple of years. Bowen was 10 of 21 for 108 yards, a touchdown and a pick. Pierre had the fumble in the end zone that we just showed you that ended up being a touchback. This is not good for USD. And I guess I'll pose this at you. Who are you more worried about at 0-2, South Dakota or Montana State?
Definitely South Dakota, just with you factor in the week two losses. I mean, the Yotes losing to Lamar. I mean, that's just a
Yeah.
bad loss. And Montana State's at 0-2, they're up against it when it comes to playoff position and all that because they're the Cats are now two Division One wins behind NDSU
Right.
and South Dakota State's. And I mean, sometimes making it to the FCS championship game, the difference there is if you get the 1 or 2 seed compared to the 3 or 4 seed. So, yeah, at the same time, Montana State was right there with South Dakota State, and so my opinion of Montana State doesn't change as far as like how good they can be or how good they are. When they have the 0-2 record next to them, that makes you pause a little bit, but then you factor in who they've played. I still think Montana State is going to really good season. They're just up against it when it comes to that playoff
Yeah,
positioning.
if you had told me those two would combine to be 0-4, I would not believe you through the first 2 weeks. There's no way you could have sold me on that one.
Yeah, especially just with how much hype they came
Yes.
in coming into this year, and it's tough for South Dakota because I know everyone gets bit hard by the transfer
Well,
portal, but you kind of just feel a little bit more for South Dakota because they were building and building and building, and at the start of January last year or of this year, I guess you go, man, South Dakota might be preseason number two. I mean, their offensive line
yep.
is going to be awesome, and Bauman and Pierre, and then they kind of get gutted there, and it's more of a rebuilding project than maybe some of us thought.
All right, real quick before we get to our games to spotlight that you have for this week, I got to give a shout out. You and I both. I think newcomer of the week is West Georgia. West Georgia goes and beats Nichols handily. We know what Nichols did to Incarnate Word to start the year in the UAC, where that's Tarleton's turf, but West Georgia is a new team up. I was talking with a couple of Bison staff members that are from that conference, the old Gulf South Conference in Division II, saying, watch out. They could be the next team on the come from moving up in the Division II ranks is UWG.
Yeah, this is their second year now in the FCS, and they competed pretty well last year. I know their record wasn't great, but they had like 4 one-score losses, within the UAC, and now to start this year 2-0, two dominating
Yeah.
wins as well. This last week, like you said, beating Nichols, I thought was very impressive, and yeah, I mean they had Division II success, and I think they have a nice stadium as well. Funding, I'm not sure exactly where they're at there, but they definitely look like a newcomer to the FCS that could make some noise. And, I'm curious if a team like West Florida, there's kind of been rumors that they could be joining the FCS as well. That'd be another good addition to the subdivision. And I know sometimes when there are D2 to FCS move ups, some of them you kind of go, they're not going to move the needle at all. But I do think West Georgia has potential to rise pretty quickly.
Now, they're not eligible yet. They still got to go through their Division II transition. I think it's now 3 years instead of 4. But that's just a player that we watch in that league that could upset the apple cart when we go later on in the season.
Yeah, and they did a pretty good job last year of bringing in impact FBS transfers. Now they lost some of those guys back to the FBS, but being in that area, you're going to be able to recruit really well and also bring in FBS transfers who are from that area. They went to the Power Four, didn't work out. They come back, and usually it's like for every one that doesn't work out, there is a player that does work out. So you kind of pick your battles there.
There's some dudes down that part of the world. You mentioned West Florida's another. I think with probably within a month or two, we're probably going to hear them moving up to FCS football. All right, let's have it. Let's start with our top games, spotlight games for Week 3. To me, this is a biggie for UND. UND goes to Montana in Missoula on Saturday, Sam. We know the game last year on how big it was for UND to get that one. Now they got to go out to Missoula to see how this one goes this coming Saturday.
Yeah, a huge game here. And, I know we'll see where the rankings are at. I know a lot of people have both in their top 10 as far as their ballots. And, I wrote too in my ballot breakdown that I think the winner of this game has an argument to be in the top five or at number
I'd
five
agree with that.
this time
Yep.
next week. Because, like, right now, I mean, I have Illinois State, at number five. Other people have, like Rhode Island in your top five. We don't really feel great about it, but
Don't
with
feel
South
great
Dakota
about that at
losing,
all.
like someone's got to move into that
Yep.
spot. And I think whoever wins this one in Missoula has a really good argument to be in that top five. So that's a great one. I really like ETSU going to West Georgia as well. We just talked about West Georgia. ETSU looks potentially like the best team in the SoCon, but the SoCon is down bad
Yep.
right now. They have really struggled with some non-conference losses, so that this is another big opportunity for the SoCon to get back on track. I like Northern Arizona going to Southern Utah
Okay.
as well. Southern Utah is tough to figure out because they hammered Idaho State last week, and Idaho State has two near FBS wins, and then Southern Utah loses to San
San
Diego.
Diego, right?
So like I don't know what to do with them. Northern Arizona is a ranked team out of the Big Sky, so that's a good matchup. But then last one is Southern Illinois at UT Martin. I like Southern Illinois, but you play a non-D1
Yep.
and you dominate there, and then you lose to Purdue. A somewhat competitive game as well, but really hard to make out what the Salukis are. A good road test going to UT Martin, who's I don't think they're going to be ranked, but they're routinely in that playoff conversation. So this is a really good non-conference game right here.
Real quick on the SoCon before we go. The Citadel went and blew out Samford on the road this past weekend. I think the Citadel got 40 points. Presbyterian already has 2 wins. Presbyterian, by the way, is a non-scholarship, has 2 wins over SoCon teams. Mercer lost to Presbyterian as well. I don't know what to make of the league. I really don't right now.
Yeah, it's I know they really feel like they should have more than one team, in the playoff mix. And you could argue that before the season started.
Yeah, not now.
Not now, right now. I mean, so much of your playoff position is what you do in the non-conference, and there is, and even Chattanooga, who was picked to finish, I believe, second in the league, they lost, pretty handedly as well to Tennessee Tech, and so they that's why I pointed out this ETSU West Georgia one, because they need some type of non-conference win to bump them up.
Yep.
And so this is an important one for ETSU and the SoCon.
They're trying to get Tennessee Tech to count now. They would love Tennessee Tech to be in the SoCon now, not a year from now, considering how the Golden Eagles have started this season. Real quick before we go, I know the Bison have done what they've expected. Have they been more impressive to you, or this is what you thought through the first 2 games?
I think maybe a little bit more impressive than I anticipated. The only reason I say a little bit is because you looked at these first 2 games and said, okay, NDSU should dominate, and that's exactly what they did. And sometimes that's what good teams do. They don't let inferior opponents stick around too long. But I was pretty high on NDSU's defense, and I think they're playing really well. And I think the offense is probably clicking, better than expected. But, I think once we get to conference play, we'll really learn really how good NDSU is. But I think, so far they are maybe surpassing expectations a little bit. You have to factor in the opponents they are playing. But I do think the Bison are looking really good. And, like I said earlier, South Dakota State has the better on paper resume. But to me, NDSU still looks like the better team. Again, factor in the opponents, but I think NDSU is still the favorite to win it all this year.
You're the man. Awesome stuff from Bozeman. Was fun to follow. Appreciate the time as always. And we'll do this again next week, okay?
All right, sounds good. Thank you.
There you go, Sam Herder from Hero Sports, BetMGM. Great stuff out in Bozeman covering the Cats and the Jacks game. We're way overdue for a break. We'll get caught up here, wrap up our first hour. Big second hour coming up. Kolpak will join us in a few minutes to recap the Bison win and look ahead to the home opener. More on a Overreaction Monday of Hot Mike after this.